Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started anyway. I want to welcome you to the study session of the September 22nd, 2021 regular meeting of the Governing Board. This evening we are going to have a presentation concerning our 2021-2022 Journey 2025 metrics. Lots of numbers here. Dr. Jennifer Fletcher, who is our Executive Director of Accountability, Assessment, Grants, and Research, is going to present the proposed metrics. Dr. Fletcher?
Can we change it? Do you mind if I begin with the AZ merit results? Or would you like me to start with the board? Okay. All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I am excited to be the sole show of today's study session. It's all me. So congratulations. I hope you enjoy what I have to say. We are going to talk first about our fiscal year 2020-2021 AZ merit assessments results. So that is last year. This agenda looks unwieldy. Please don't panic. I just gave you a high-level overview of all the different visualizations of data we are going to explore. We're going to talk through just a handful of variables and factors that could affect this data, and finally give you some concluding remarks. All right, I'm going to go slide by slide. Obviously, I would like to take time after each one if there are questions, because data can be complicated, it can be messy, it can be confusing. So let's start with our first visualization. This is Chandler Unified District percent proficient, right? Percent passing. Those are our proficient and our highly proficient students compared to the state year over year. In blue, we have the district.
First, let's start with the definition. What is ELA for everybody?
ELA is English, Language Arts, and Math. Okay, so blue is Chandler Unified District, green is the state. Right, just give you a moment to look at that. If you look at the left half, we have our ELA percent proficient. You can see Chandler in 2018 was 56%, 57% in 2019, and 56% in 2021. Just a reminder, there was no statewide assessment in FY 2020 due to COVID. So you can see consistently in ELA, we have performed even through 2021, and as we would expect, we have outperformed the state. Now in math, unfortunately, a slightly different story. 58% in 2018, 58% in 2019, and we did see a decline of 49% in 2021. Questions, concerns?
Is this aggregate of all grade levels?
Correct. Yep.
3 through
all
11,
grades.
or okay? Because we don't test K through 2.
Correct.
Okay.
And we don't also have grade 9, grade 11, grade 12, right? So this is 3 through 8 and 10.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to dive a little deeper. We started big picture, Chandler compared to the state. Now let's look at how do we compare across districts that are not only demographically similar to us, but who are also neighboring districts. So you'll see the dark blue again is Chandler. Just for information purposes, we've retained all 3 years of data there for you. Your light blue are your other districts across the state, and your green is the state. So I know that's a lot of information all at once. Let me just walk through. Chandler, right, was our 56% in FY21. You can see we are the second highest among this group of districts. Higley Unified did outperform us at 58%. However, Higley and Queen Creek are neighboring districts. They are demographically different than we are in terms of their student population. So when you remove those two schools, right, visually, then Chandler is performing at the top out of all the districts that are like us in the state. And this is just ELA. Here is our same slide, but in math. Again, our 49% for Chandler. There are other districts outperforming us in 2021, right? We have Higley, we have Deer Valley, we have Queen Creek, and Scottsdale. But again, compared to the districts who are like us, we are in the top performing districts in the state. Okay, this is one of my favorites, just because it gives you a picture of the decline. This is what change in percent proficient occurred from 2019 to 2021 by district. So again, Chandler is our dark blue, our other districts are our light blue, our state. So the state in that top half is ELA, saw a 4% decline in their proficiency scores from 2019 to 2021. Chandler only saw a 1% decline, right? That 57 to 56%. That also puts us in the top of our districts similar to us, right? Only two other districts, Gilbert and Scottsdale, had a 1% decline. If you look at the bottom half of the slide, we have our math data. We did see that 9% decline, right? But the state saw an 11% decline. And if you compare us to other districts, we fall in the middle. We weren't the best, but we weren't the worst.
Question, so basically English and math, the English went down less than the math did. And it's across the board, what is the difference for that?
What do you mean, what caused it?
What's the difference between English scores went down, but math scores went down more? Why is the difference between English and math just across the board?
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of variables contributing to that. We could speak to, one, it's a lot easier to do ELA English, right? Parents can read at home. Those aren't as such giant contents that rely on one another to progress from grade level to grade level. Whereas math, right, you really need to know this content before you can perform well in your next level content. And if you recall, right, in 2020, we had that last fourth quarter loss of instruction. In 2021, we started later in the school year. So there's likely a lot of that being seen more in math, as well as potentially it could be harder to learn and teach math online than it is to do ELA. There's a lot of factors there that we will never be able to pinpoint, to be 100% honest with you, but a lot of pieces that contribute to that.
Dr. Fletcher?
Yeah.
Another question on the
Yeah.
math. Are we seeing that there are certain grade bands that influence that drop more than other grade bands? And if
Yes.
so, which ones?
I will, if you bear with me, I will get there.
Oh, okay.
If you don't
Thank
mind.
you.
Yep. We will talk about that more in detail. And if I don't
okay.
answer your question officially, then make sure, ask me again.
I also think, Ms. Rowell, as she goes through the rest of the slides, we're going to see some comparisons based on our demographic buildup and where girls did do better and where boys do better, and what our populations look like during that as well. So there's a little bit more digging in as Dr. Fletcher moves through.
Okay, this one looks unwieldy, so I'm actually gonna operate this one in Tableau for you. We're gonna start, on the left is ELA, on the right is math. This is our FY21, right, percent proficient by grade level. So you can see the grades here, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Right, so what we're gonna look at with this one first is we're just gonna start talking about what are the trends occurring at the state. So I'm gonna add in here, hopefully. Let's try again. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to add in the state. So again, CUSD is outperforming the state, not a surprise for us, right? You can see some slightly different trends here in ELA from grade 4 to 5 at the state than what we saw, but they had a larger drop from 5 to 6. Okay, so again, we can look at the trends in math. You see we have a massive improvement, increase in percent proficient from grade 8 to grade 10. And now we're gonna slowly add in a few more districts at a time just so we can get big picture. All right, so we added in Deer Valley in orange, Dysart in red. Let's put Gilbert in there in light blue and Mesa in gray. Okay, Paradise Valley, Peoria. Tucson and Scottsdale. So one of the most important things here is you can see everyone is having similar patterns. across the state, across the districts, right? We start in grade 3 pretty high, percent proficient. We see an increase in grade 4, right? So Barb, I think, Madam President, I think this speaks to where are your gaps between grades. And then Chandler, right, we're the blue, we see a decline in grade 5, heading to 6, headed to 7. We level out in grade 8, and then we see another decline. So there are definitely areas to address grade-wise here, but I do want to point out in ELA, right, compared to similar districts in the state, Chandler begins 2nd grade at the top. We end 10th grade at the top. And across all of the other grades, we are in the top 3 or 4 districts in the state. Okay? And then if we look at our math, right, we're top 4 in math, kind of a decline, but not a giant decline into grade 6. And then we see 7th and 8th grade, something's happening in math, improvement in grade 10. But again, in grade 10, Chandler is outperforming other districts that are like us in math. Oh, let me go back to the PowerPoint. So we're going to take that and let's add on some more details. Let's look at the longitudinal trend data for Chandler. So this is our percent proficient ELA year over year. So 2018, 2019, remember no assessment in 2020, and then FY 2021. All right, so here is also a bigger picture to that grade data that you were asking about, right? We see a slight decline in our grade 3 from 61 to 59%, still better than the 2018 score. We see an increase in grade 4, right, that we saw on that trend line from 2018, 2019. A slight decrease in grade 5, slight decrease in grade 6, but again, remaining constant with 2018. A slight decrease in grade 7, an increase in grade 8, and an increase in grade 10. So again, just more information for the big picture. We have some particular grades that we may want to target, focus, see what's happening, how are they aligning to the next grade, and things of that sort in ELA. All right, now we're going to look at the same data in terms of math. And as you know, recall we had a 9% decline in math, right? So these ones, all of them, you'll see a decline since 2019 and 2018 in math to 2021. And just a few extra pieces of information. So in grade 10, 2018, you'll see there's a blank. If you recall, that was when we had end of course assessments, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, right? So those are not comparable to the grade 10 assessment that's currently being given, so we didn't include that in the 2018 grade 10 data. And the same goes for grade 8. Students could accelerate and take Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry classes and pass the end of course assessment, but we've excluded those from the grade 8 because they're different peer groups, right? They don't make sense to compare over time. Okay, here's where we dive into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about our subgroups. We're going to focus first on ELA. Chandler Unified District data is on the left half of your screen. We put the state on the right just so that we can do a comparison. We can understand where we fall within the state norms and standards. Your yellow line is your female students. Your gray line is your male. And then that dark gray in the middle is your average, right, of all students. So as you can see in ELA, our females are outperforming our males, and they have been, and that is a trend that aligns with what's happening in the state. Chandler, compared to the state, however, we didn't see as much of a decline from prior years as the state did.
What grade level is this in? Did you say that already?
These are all grades combined.
All grades combined. Okay, thank you.
I can show you the grade level, but that will take us 12 slides because there's too many lines plotted all at once. But if you want to walk through that at a later date, we absolutely can. One of the big pieces that we want to look at with our subgroup data is addressing the gaps, right? So if you look at Chandler District yellow line compared to light gray in 2018, you can see we have a 9% gap, right? Females subtracted from males. If you look over to 2021, we have the same gap. So it's good that the gap didn't increase, but it's not good that the gap didn't close, right? Now, the state, it makes it look like the gap closed from 2018 to 2021, but it closed because the students performed worse. We want to close our gap, right, and see an increase in our student performance. We don't want to close it because the students are not doing as well. But the gaps are the big pieces we want to address. All right, so here is math. Again, opposite of what we saw in ELA, our male students perform better than our female students, and that is a trend across the state. Both state and Chandler saw a decline, right, in the math results, as we've already discussed. The difference here is that if you look at Chandler's data in 2018, we only had a 1% gap, and our gap grew to 5% from males to females. Okay, so that is definitely an area we may want to target, focus on for interventions, additional support, is trying to close that gap again. The state did not see, they saw an increase in the gap, but not as much as Chandler saw. Okay, this one also has a lot of lines, so if you want me to do this one in Tableau after I talk through it, we absolutely can. These are our subgroups by ethnicity, first on ELA, Chandler compared to the state. There's a lot of pieces that we can glean from this data. First and foremost, right, as expected, Chandler is still outperforming the state. Second, we can know how our subgroups perform compared to other subgroups. So your dark blue line is your Asian population, they perform the highest, followed by the light blue line, which is our white students, then 2 or more races. We still have that all students, that's just an average to show you how they compare, right? So those 3 groups are performing above the average of all of our students. The next 4 groups are below the average of all of our students, Native Hawaiian, followed by our Hispanic, African American, and our American Indian population. As you can see, most of these held constant with the exception of that red line, our American Indian population. They saw a little bit more, slightly more of a hit that occurred more so in 2019, but still some of that could be lingering, some of those concerns still carrying over into the 2021 data. Again, the gaps here are important to look at, right? We want to try to close the gaps between these subgroups, but not close them down. We want to move them all up and close them up. Chandler's gaps for ELA remained relatively constant, so given the current climate, we'll take that as a win. It doesn't mean we don't have room to improve, but right, we'll take the gap constant as a win, whereas the state saw a slight increase in their gaps. And again, if you want to look at particular lines, we can hop into Tableau and compare subgroups if you'd like. So we're going to do the same on math as you would expect, right? We're going to see that decline from 2019 to 2021 across the board, right? Everyone had it, including us. Chandler is still outperforming the state in 2021 with our Asian population at the top, followed by white, 2 or more races, again performing above the all students average. And then our African American, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, and American Indian populations performing below the line. We did unfortunately see gap increases in some of our subgroups in math, as we would probably expect. And so again, those will be areas that we can target with interventions, additional supports. Okay, last deep dive. Now we're going to talk about programs. So we have our homeless population, our income eligibility population, our EL students, and our students with disabilities. Again, consistently, Chandler is outperforming the state, but as you can see, right, all of these populations of students are still well below the all student average. So additional supports are needed for these groups. Our students with disabilities, though, I want to point out that light blue line, and it's hard to see on here because it falls right on the the line of the screen, actually saw an increase from 2019 and 2018 in their ELA proficiency results. And everyone else held relatively constant or only a slight decline, with the exception of our EL students. And remember, to be labeled as an EL student, that means at the moment you are in an English language program or parent withdrawn, and you have not passed the test saying you are proficient in English, right? So as you can imagine, that means it's probably challenging to take a statewide assessment. And again, in math, so still outperforming the state. We have a big gap increase in our EL students that occurred. They had a major decline in math, likely attributed to the fact, right, that there are probably some English needs that need to happen to help them perform well on the assessment. But our homeless population did see a very, very slight, an increase of 1% from 2019 in math.
Dr. Fletcher?
Yeah.
Also, while that's up there,
Microphone.
there were some.
Is your microphone?
Thank you. There were some changes as well statewide with the number of students being tested from our SPED populations as well as our EL populations, where the data in the past, some students were excluded. Does that have any variance on or any impact on some of what we're seeing, not only here but across the state, where all students now are, there's no exempt students from testing?
Absolutely. You used to be able to be withdrawn from statewide assessments for various reasons, and that is no longer the case. And so all of those students who had a particular need or reason that they were not supposed to be or wanting to take the assessment, by law, you now have to be administered an assessment, even if you can only complete one portion, right? But that one portion then contributes to your overall score and then can impact your overall proficiency results.
When did that change happen?
I believe it was three
Yeah.
to 4 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not-
3 years ago,
Okay.
which is a good change because you want to test students on the measure, but you were able to put into IEP plans what portion, or they would take a different state assessment. There was an alternative assessment that we were able to provide. And for our EL students, of course, then, some of them are going into this test with limited proficiency. And so even taking a written test over a computerized test becomes a little bit more of an issue based on the fact that that the computerized test sometimes does provide additional information such as measurement tools that they can utilize and things of that nature. So just some variables that I think Dr. Fletcher will look at in the next slide.
Yeah, thank you for the segue. That was perfect. Again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. This is just some of the top factors that we believe are contributing to the data, right? In 2021, we had to go to paper-based testing. In the past, we have been on a computer-based testing, right? So that is different, knowing how to use the computer versus paper pencil. I have to write things out by hand. I don't have my tools that I'm used to on the computer to calculate different pieces, right? That's a different way of assessing. We obviously had in-school learning versus online instruction, and as we know, some students and adults learn better online and others do not, right? Some are better in the classroom with their peers, with their teachers. Access to technology, as you're aware, could be a large issue. Do they have Wi-Fi? Do they have computers? Do they have enough computers for every child in their family, in their house? Changes in instruction, right? Teachers are having to learn how to switch modalities. How do you switch from online to in-person to both, right? If you have students who are at home doing online instruction, there are decreases, as you all know, in social connections, teacher interaction, distractions at home, potentially, and in outside of school, right? There are COVID quarantine isolation issues, mental health struggles, lost quarter of instruction that I already addressed. There could potentially be less targeted instruction for students when you're doing it online. It's a harder space. A teacher can't see your nonverbals, right, that show this isn't making sense. They can't see that blank sheet of paper that says, I don't know what I'm doing, right, when they're in an online capacity. Unfinished learning, fewer students did participate in the statewide assessment. So just know we saw a decline of 3,000 students who took the ELA assessment and roughly 5,000 in the math because parents didn't want to bring their children in to take the test in person, right? For safety, personal reasons, whatever the case may be. All of that affects the overall results and the data. And then student supports outside of school, right, could vary depending on socioeconomic status and other factors.
So there was no option last year, Mr. Olive, to have students take the test at home where they were learning. They had to come into facilities, and so our principals and staffs worked with students who had never been on that campus prior, even coming on the campus and taking the test. And as you see by the numbers of 5,000 in math and 3,000, there isn't an opt-out for state testing. There is no opt-out available. But if you just don't have your child come in, because that's where your learning is online. Remember, we had 12,000 students online. Some parents didn't feel comfortable of just doing that for testing, so they didn't come in. So that also has an impact on the testing number too. And not that any of these are excuses, but they're variables that we have to work around, work through, or resolve as we work with gap funds to be able to address some of those pieces.
Okay.
Just some overall concluding remarks. We want to remind everyone, right, this is one statewide assessment that is given annually. And while it does yield us valuable information and data to drive instruction, supports, right, grant funding, it is not the end all be all of assessments. We do, right, as a district use formative benchmark assessments that happen throughout the year so we can have a better grasp on where our students at and how to adjust instruction to meet them where they are. And again, as we've noted throughout the presentation, we do well in comparison to the state. We do well in comparison to other districts, but we absolutely have room to grow, room to improve, right? We want to close the gaps and move everyone in the highly proficient and proficient categories, increasing us over time.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher.
I have some questions.
Yes, Mrs.
you.
Bruner.
So you kind of alluded to a few things that I had questions about. Were there any indicators or assessments similar to AZ Merit that teachers might have provided, maybe some of the benchmark assessments in Q3 of 2020 that can kind of give us a middle value to see where that gap is between 19 and 21?
We have Galileo data from that year, but we can look at it. We will still be facing though the same challenges, right? So we can look at comparing beginning of year to middle to end of year and see where the growth is happening or not happening. That will support us in determining where our interventions and our targeted support and additional staffing need to go. Yeah, we can do it.
So I was just curious if we could get the end of third quarter before everything hit the fan, to see if that trend was already happening or not. I mean, it just might be helpful, because then that would help isolate out some variables, because there's so many variables, it's so hard to know what's what. We know, we can guess that certain ones were more important than others. Just thought that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, we only do it in the middle of the year though, so it's probably given, there wouldn't be one in third quarter. It was probably given November, December, so it probably, that would be pre-pandemic, I'm not sure, but we can absolutely look at it if you're interested.
Okay, we do a beginning, middle, and end. But if we looked at that, we have seen, Ms. Bruner, we have seen a pretty good correlation of predictive pieces between our benchmarking and the state testing. So that would be a good analysis to look at, as long as we have the same value, meaning the same students took the same tests. But definitely, that's something we can look at.
And then, were there any changes in the tests at all in the last few years? I'm just curious. You had mentioned something about students being included, but I wasn't sure if the test had changed at all at any of the levels.
I have to give the details for you. I mean, I know that they update the blueprints to improve them and make sure they are aligned to the state standards, but I don't recall off the top of my head how frequently those changes have been made.
Okay. And just to clarify, so I've heard this before, and I just want to know if this is accurate how I'm perceiving 7th and 8th grade, especially math, maybe 6th grade a little bit. So, an accelerated student who does algebra in 7th grade is not included in the 7th grade data. And the kid who's taken geometry 8th grade hasn't been included for 2 years in the data.
Assuming they did not also take the statewide assessment, correct. But they are supposed to also be taking the statewide assessment in the grade in which they are enrolled.
So do we have data to show whether all our kids were included or if the kids who were accelerated were not?
We would have to go student by student and compare to ADE's data. We can look.
I mean, that sounds like a lot. I just thought maybe if we had a clue, did one site not do that and another site did?
It would, it'd be easier to go school site by school site to find out if they're administering the grade level enrolled assessment than trying to. So we can absolutely look into that.
Because that's a pain in the butt for the kids to have to take 2 tests. I get that.
It is.
But then you can't really do these graphs if you're going to pull the top kids out of 7th and 8th grade. It's not
and
fair.
that's
to look
why
at the trends.
that's why they stopped the end of course assessments, and they just went over.
Right.
So the last 2 years have been just grade enrolled. It's just
so
grade
19 and
8.
21?
Yep. It's just grade 8 2018 that had the variations.
Okay.
But 19 and 21 should just be grade enrolled assessment.
Okay.
And we would rather, as educators, we definitely would rather the students be tested in the course that they just finished.
Right.
But with the state mandate that they have to test at the grade level, the chronological grade level that they are enrolled, some of these kids, like you said, they've worked on geometry all year. And hopefully they remember the algebraic formulas that they remembered, but they have to go back now and be tested on a course they had a year prior. That's probably pretty similar in anything in the secondary level. But again, it's difficult for kids to go back and do that recall. So, and I'm not saying that could be a variable or not, but it is a thing that we requested years ago. Could we have that variance of testing where they're at? And we were told no, it had to be by grade level.
Okay. Do teachers have any data from this quarter to show if any gaps have been mitigated yet, or when will we get that?
Grades are being submitted a week. Correct me if I'm wrong. Friday. Grades are being submitted Friday, so I believe after Friday we can start to look at the comparisons between, we have a visualization for our principals, assistant principals that compares their course grade to how they performed on AZ Merit, so we can start to address those gaps.
I guess I was looking more for like benchmark kind of numbers rather than grade on there.
Yeah.
Because, it
After
might,
Friday.
it might be like half homework or something, and it might not be as valid as like a benchmark test to indicate, right, or no?
Say that last piece again.
Well, if you're just looking at a quarter grade, right, part of that would be their testing and part of that would be probably work completion and some other
Right.
activities and projects that they've done. And so if we actually want to compare apples to apples, we probably want to look more at a benchmark test to get an idea if the gap's being met rather than a quarter grade.
And that would be our school city data.
Okay.
So we have that. We haven't done the analysis on it yet, but we have that data. So we could compare how are they doing on their first test, how they're doing on their first benchmark formative assessment in this fiscal year to see where they need to go or what we need to catch up on.
And so what does that look like when they go to use that data? Is it done in PLCs or does the district-wide look at the data? Like how does that, so we can see if what they're doing is getting them back to where they need to be or not?
PLCs look at the data. The thing is, we're trying to make the data not something that somebody else controls, but that they have access to. So our sites can go right in and look at that data. It gets all put into Tableau, which we have one of the most robust dashboards, I think, around. So we're really teaching them to be able to search for the data they need. And I know we put lots of people and lots of time into doing that versus them depending on it being pulled. We're going to get to the point where teachers then can be able to pull that data, be responsible, and will arrive when we have students actually look at their data and say, this is where I want my goals want to be set. But that's what we're looking at on our future ready pieces. But right now, we bring the data to them. We have those discussions in administrative meetings, PLCs, mostly at the elementary schools because there's so many of them. They break down into smaller groups. And then they look at their cohort data on their campus and bring that in. School City's new to some of our folks this year, but they have access to not only the school city, but also the ATI pieces. Dr. Fletcher made sure that in the transition, we were able to preserve that information from our old provider as well. So there's plenty of time to do that as well, since we're right into the first quarter. Even though this quarter is a little tougher, it's more of a normal progression of teaching than we had last year or even the fourth quarter of the year before.
Was this data shared with teachers, and are we hearing anything from them? And are there things that they need, or things that they focus on that aren't measured maybe by the test that is a priority right now too? Or what's going on with those issues?
You are the first viewers of this presentation and data. So after this, we will, I mean, it is publicly available, right, for them to go look at, but then we will take it to our administration meetings and share it out and start the conversations about what are you seeing, what are the supports you need, where do you think, based on your students in your classroom, you need help and additional interventions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Olive, do you have any comments or questions? Ms. Love? Mr. Worth, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, we'll just go ahead and go on. I believe you are now going to also talk about our metrics, our board metrics.
Welcome back, me again. This time we're going to talk about our Journey 2025 board metrics for this fiscal year. High-level objectives that we have today, we want to talk through what are the metrics, just refresh everyone's memory. What are the metrics? What data do they use? And then we're going to determine if I'm going to let you know if there are ones we need to keep eyes on based on the current climate and any recommendations we may have. I do want you to know that overall, we are not making or anticipating making many changes to this. We want the targets to remain the same, right? We don't want to have moving targets for people. I worked at the state, so I'm going to put this out there. The state does that quite frequently. It makes it hard, right, for everyone to know where to go when the target is constantly moving. So we are, generally speaking, going to try to keep our targets the same. We have the data to support that, and we're going to try to minimize how many we need to exclude this year, and hopefully only exclude ones that are truly COVID impact related this year. All right, I put all the details on here for you. Board goal number 1 is our equity rubric, essentially. We have, I'm gonna go through line by line just so you can have some more information about them. We have our letter A, 80% students agree or to strongly agree with their site having a positive climate and dispositions. I just want you to know this is data collected in the current year. Again, no changes to the targets. School discipline policy is also current year data, no changes to the targets. Enrollment rates in advanced programs is also current year data that we utilize, no change to our targets. Overall AASA proficiency in ELA and math is prior year data because we don't have the data returned to us in time to update the metric. You're probably wondering, what is AASA? That is the new name for AZ Merit. It is Arizona's Academic Standards Assessment. So last year it was AZ M2. Before that it was just AZ Merit. Now it is Arizona's Academic Standard Assessment. So all we did there was change the name, but we do not expect the target to change. ACT exams are also prior year data because we do not get the results returned back in time to us. No target change. Graduation rates are also prior year. No target change because we also have to give students the time to finish summer school, right? So we want cleaned data for the following year. So again, no target changes, just an update removing AZM2 to changing it to AASA. Board goal 2 is grade level proficiency. So students at all grade levels will exceed the state on AASA. That is also prior year data. Again, just a name change there, not changing the target or the assessment, just changing the name. Students at K6 grade level will show growth from beginning of year to end of year, pre and post assessment. That is current year data. And we do have some minor changes to this one. Last year it said ATI, right? We have replaced ATI in K6 with school city. So we are updating ATI to say school city, but we are also including DIBELS 8. And I will explain what we're doing here. So if you're a kindergarten and first grade student, you come in, you have to take DIBELS 8 in ELA and reading. You also have to take the school city assessment. And what we're hearing from our teachers is that we are over-testing our students. You have this wonderful DIBELS 8 assessment that has a beginning, middle, and an end. That is a formative benchmark assessment. They are aligned. We should just be using DIBELS 8. So for our kindergarten and first grade students, we are proposing to use DIBELS 8 data to calculate growth for this metric and not have those students additionally test in school city. Okay? And then for school city, our students in kinder have to also take the math assessment in school city. They take a beginning of year, a middle of year, and an end of year. But this assessment is on a computer. It uses a mouse. So particularly our kinders at the beginning of the year, we don't know if they are struggling with the assessment because they don't know how to use a mouse, right, and the computer skills, or if they don't truly know the math content. So we would like to remove the beginning of year school city math assessment, again, reduce the number of assessments our students are taking, and for growth, strictly for math for kindergarten students, compare middle of year to end of year data for 2B. So this is the one where you're going to see the biggest changes. Again, we are attempting to reduce the assessments taken by our kinder and first grade students right when they come in, and ensuring that we have accurate data results and not results related to, I don't know how to use a computer or a mouse or whatever the case may be. All right, board goal 3, grade reading at grade level. Right, we have third grade students on AASA, so that's our statewide assessment. All we did was a name change here from AZM2 to AASA. That is still prior year data. Students in grade 3 will demonstrate expected growth. This is current year data using our school city ELA post assessment. Same targets, nothing's changing, just updating some names here. All right. Board goal 4 are college and career readiness indicators. Scholarship dollars, just so you have the information, again, is a current year data collection point. Service learning hours is also a current year data collection point. If you recall, this one was excluded last year, and it's in blue because we would like to keep our eyes on it this year. We are hearing from principals that students still are having a hard time going in and being able to volunteer in spaces because COVID is still in existence, right? So we're going to keep our eyes on that one at this point in time. National Merit Scholars and Flynn Scholars is current year data. Advanced Placements is prior year. Again, we don't get the data back in time to calculate the metric. And again, Advanced Placement scores, prior year. No target changes though, everything consistent from prior years. We have our ACT data for F through I. Those we just updated to say that it's 11th grade students taking it, not 12th grade. Same assessment, no target changes. Those are prior year data points. IB data is prior year. This was one that was excluded last year. We do not anticipate having this issue this year, so the target will remain the same. And then dual credit hours is current year data. Again, no target changes. Just updating a grade level here. All right, board goal 4 in terms of our pipeline data, I want to explain a little bit. This data is actually 2 years prior. So for our current year, we will look at data from cohort 2020, right? Because we need to have them graduated. We need to give them a year to take their freshman courses. And then we have to give ourselves time to get the data back from the entities that provide it to us. That's why we are 2 years prior on this one. If you think about cohort 2020, right, their freshman year then was all COVID year. We have no idea what to expect with this data. That's why it's in blue. It's one, once we have the data, we can make better recommendations and decisions surrounding the targets and what it looks like. We just don't know at this point. And then our CTE data is also prior year. Again, we don't get it in time, but not changing the target. Board goal 5, student dropout rate. Dropout rate is a prior year calculation. Chronic absences is a current year calculation. As you can imagine, that's in blue. Another one that was excluded last year, and we will likely be recommending we're gonna need to exclude it again due to the quarantines and the isolations that are impacting students' absence rate in terms of how we collect data. Board goal 6 is graduation rate. Graduation rate is again a prior year calculation because we need to have time for summer school as well as make sure the codes, this is gonna sound crazy, but the codes that are submitted from the district to the state are correct and accurate. That's where we get this data. And then the percentage of 9th grade students who attain 5.5 credits is a current year calculation. Market share is also a current year. This one is in blue because we need to keep an eye on this one as well. We're not sure what this will look like. It's also in blue because if you recall, last year you did adjust the metric. You changed and reverted back to FY20. So because we don't know what to expect 100% on this one, we have retained the FY20 targets for 4, 3, 2, and 1 for each category. But we do know, right, we lost over 2,400 students. We have only gained back roughly 800-900 of those. So we would propose to stick with the FY20 rate that was also used last year, but would like to see more information on that, and we'll present it to you when we have it. Employer of choice, these are all current year calculations, no target changes. Everything is going to remain the same. Same with district of choice, current year calculation, same targets. Same with percentage of dollars spent in the classroom, current year calculation, same targets, no change. Outside contributions, it's gonna look like I made a change to this. I didn't. Before it said meet or exceeded 2.5% of the general budget. We have always been using the M&O, maintenance and operations budget, so we just clarified the terminology so that everyone knew what we were collecting and how we were reviewing the data. The numbers have been updated in each category, so there is a slight increase in our target from last year. Communication with community, again, a current year calculation, no target change. The end. That's all of them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dr. Fletcher. Are there any comments or questions from the board? No? Okay. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bruner?
I just wanted to thank you for all your work on organizing this. And I just did want to mention one thing about the dual enrollment. We've had some conversations, Dr. Gilbert and I, about this, that I think we have a great opportunity to expand to students who are not just taking AP classes or honors classes, but there's a lot of coursework like CIS 105 or business classes or a Math 141. That could be coursework. We could be grabbing more kids because we want to keep them on the path to the highest level they can achieve. And if we grab those, middle of the road kids, not the ones way up here, to be in dual enrollment, the research shows they're more likely to go to college. So I'd love to see something maybe this year where we do a little analysis of how we could add some more courses for those levels.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Madam President, just before we end here, just for the audience and people that may be viewing, the metrics here and the goals that are set are how we measure our strategic plan Journey 2025. And so without having hard data, which boards in the past have asked us to do, and this board is committed to doing, to measure our growth and measure our success, it's always a continuum of moving people forward and moving our student growth forward. But we measure in a lot of areas, and we do provide input and updates along the year. So it's not like we just report now. I'm very happy that we didn't reduce our targets because I think those were still targets that we need to aim, and we need to overcome some of the gaps that existed. So when we say we're not changing targets, is because we know they're high, and we know
Just a
there was
moment,
a dip, but we're going to keep working towards that as our target and not reducing it, where some places may say, well, you had a 9% loss in math at some grade levels. Well, why are you still keeping your goal the same? We know we have to make that up. So, and we can do better. So when we will strive to do that as well.
Thank you. Joel, I think you had some questions? Sorry we lost you. Are you there still?
A dip, but we're going to keep working towards that as our target and not reducing it, where some places may say, well, you had a 9% loss in math at some grade level. Why are you still keeping?
Joel, if you can hear me, if you can turn off your TV, your delay on your, I think you were watching the board meeting on the stream. If you can turn that off, because we can hear it delayed.
Okay.
Okay,
I just did.
thank you.
Joel, did you have questions?
No, luckily I was able to watch it on TV. So I'd like to watch it on TV again, but I'm not sure how to mute it, so I won't go there for now.
Okay. So any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine, good.
Okay, great. That concludes our study session then, and we will take just a short break, and we will be starting the regular board meeting in about 3 minutes.